I was 1 month old when Ireland was campaigning to enter the European Union, and just people like my grandmother who went in and voted on my behalf. And I think, as the Commissioner pointed out there, you don't have to know everything about the treaty to vote on it. They didn't have online, and they didn't have telephone, and they had one radio station, and many of them, including my grandmother, no formal education. But I suppose I look back on my life as I was driving here today, and I probably feel that I have been the direct beneficiary for all of my life for her vote on our entry into Europe. And I think in this day, 3 weeks, we were told at that time it was a momentous decision, and it was. And I think the most important thing for a lot of women today and over the next 3 weeks, and in the course of our conversation with other women who perhaps aren't as interested in political affairs, or maybe don't have the time or the opportunities to become as interested in them, that we can reflect on how momentous the decision is next Friday, or Friday 3 weeks for the rest of the country. When I look back at my age, I'm 37, I'm the age of our membership in Europe, and I looked at the different things in my life that we benefited from. Many of my friends, and part of my lifetime has been the recession in the 80s, many of my friends got a chance to go to college in local regional technical colleges, because those colleges were funded by Europe, and they had ESF grant funding that otherwise, had they not been there, would not have allowed them to go to college, because budgets weren't generous, and we hadn't the level of prosperity that we've had in the last 10 years. My father took a redundancy package in the middle 80s when we were going through the recession from a stage company and from the Midlands, and much of the employment there at the time was in Pordenona. And only for the mentoring and training programmes and the Enterprise Ireland and leadership funding that gave men and women around our area and in all areas across Ireland a chance to set up their own businesses, get some funding, and not alone that, many of them didn't finish their secondary education, and certainly many of my father and mother's generation would definitely not have had the chance to go to college. Business courses, management courses, all of that was new to them. I suppose I go back then to, I worked, and I know Maria will be familiar with this, I worked at the Irish Farmers Association for 4 years, and I worked in local radio in the Midlands, and I saw leader fundings and enterprise schemes and rural enterprise schemes give women confidence to start up small food production companies, to rescale, to upscale, to do things that they wouldn't have had the confidence to do without the support systems that were there. And I suppose in the latter stage of my grandmother's life, I saw her live a life that was far more prosperous at its end than it was at its beginning. And even things like basic infrastructure, roads, sewerage scheme and water schemes, and I know they're things that we so take for granted today. They were the basic infrastructure that they did not have. But when they voted for our entry into Europe, I think they voted with their heads, because they realised a small country, an island, needed to go and trade with the rest of the world and reach out to the rest of the world. But I think more than that, I think they voted with their hearts, because they had a leap of faith in the country, but they took a leap of faith in themselves. They didn't have the answers, they didn't know the clauses and the charters and the details and the debates, but I think they had enough confidence to say, this is the right thing for our country, and this is the right thing for the people that will follow us. I suppose 2 things I've been asked, when Martin asked me to speak, was why we should vote. One of them was the enterprise and job creation argument, and I'm not going to spend long on it because I think it's been voiced very largely across the country in this particular campaign, and I'll only be repeating a lot of what has been said already. We're an exporting country. We are the 3rd most dependent country in the world on foreign direct investment for our jobs. 70% of everything we export goes to Europe, and 400,000 jobs directly and indirectly in this country depend on export-related activity. I know we're in what we would call, I suppose, in this country, Commissioner, a commuter belt area where we very much, a lot of the people in this area would commute to Dublin for their jobs, and I think they're the families, in particular the women, most affected by the recession at the moment. They have borrowed at the peak property prices in this country, and their debt is far greater than any other women had in previous recessions, and that is one of the big issues for them at this particular time. And now they're being asked to either take cuts in salary, perhaps even lose their job or go to a 2-day and 3-day week. And I think job creation and employment is one of the most, I suppose, fundamental rights to earn a living and to be able to meet the day-to-day stresses and pay the mortgage, and give many of those young women have young children, and to give those children a future. I also think, I know from one of the most recent Eurobarometer studies, that we've one of the highest rates of concerns amongst parents for our children's future here in Ireland, and a lot of that is due to the particularly bad recession we're having here at the moment, for a variety of reasons, and I think it is a big issue here for us in this country. The other thing in relation to being an exporting nation is the fact that the single market has benefited us more than most countries, because a level playing pitch benefits a small country like us. We're 4 million people operating in the biggest trading bloc, economic trading bloc in the world, and we've punched above our weight, but also that we've been presented with lots of opportunities. We also get to sell in a Eurozone market, so we don't have to worry about the fluctuations of other currencies, which we did have to worry about when we were trading with Britain, and would still do, because they're obviously in a different currency zone than us. I think some of the provisions in the treaty relate to R&D and energy policy, and they're two areas where we are encouraging our children to educate themselves in the sciences and the mathematics, so we can get into the value-added jobs that would be more long-term and more sustainable for us and for the children that are to follow. I suppose the last part I'll come to is non-economic, and maybe it goes back to why we voted to go into Europe in the first place, and it's about confidence in ourselves. We have spent all of last year and much of the debate so far in this country talking about the fear factor. And I just don't believe there's anything to fear. I think we've nothing to fear and everything to gain. And we talk about having influence at the EU table as to how it would benefit Ireland. But maybe we don't talk enough about what we have to bring to the table in Ireland and the contribution we have to make in debates. Catherine Day is the senior civil servant, and I know the man before her was a senior civil servant and he was Irish. I think it is fair to say we've influenced debates and we've made our voice heard, not just on behalf of Irish people, but I think on behalf of women across Europe. And I know many of the women before me talked about the equality directives and laws that were brought in, and indeed it was an Irish Commissioner, Paddy Hillary, who had to foist that upon a previous Irish government many moons ago so that women could have equality. So I think one of the most important things, maybe for me in 3 weeks' time, is that we have a vote of confidence in ourselves and faith in ourselves, and that this isn't about, you know, we talk a lot in this country about what the EU is doing to us, and sometimes we forget that we are the EU and we're the people at the table as well. So I suppose all I can say is that maybe it's great to have an opportunity to reflect on where we're going, and maybe that all of us over the next 3 weeks could tell our story so that we can influence others to support Europe in 3 weeks' time. Thanks.